Nick Hilton. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm talking about why I'm finally retiring my 5D Mark IV. You know, I don't really geek out about gear. I feel like technology is changing so much, so fast all the time. It's really hard for me to keep up with. I'm very much of like a, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Maybe that's because I'm stubborn. Maybe that's because I'm a little cheap. But I love using this camera. Like, I'm very comfortable using it. When I'm out shooting, I don't have to think about how to change any of my settings. It's all very muscle memory. And so it allows me to just stay in that creative photographer mode. I know the limitations of this camera. And because I know the limitations around this camera, a lot of my techniques and my post-processing workflow has been developed around this camera. And the third thing I really like about, using a DSLR is the optical viewfinder. I like to be able to see the real world in front of me instead of seeing a digital version of it. I also shoot with both eyes open, and so I like that I'm seeing the same environment with both eyes, whereas if I'm using an electronic viewfinder, this one's seeing a digital image and this one's seeing like the real world, and it kind of messes with me. Now, because I was comfortable using this camera and it worked well for my business, I really didn't see upgrading to the new mirrorless system as a necessary investment. And I got the EOS R when it came out. I used it for vlogging my mountain bike stuff, but for photography, I hated it. It didn't have enough buttons. It didn't have a joystick. Ergonomically, it was weird, so I just could never get used to it. And the EOS R also had a single SD card slot, so I knew it was never gonna work for me for weddings. But, then Canon came out with the R5, the R6, and eventually the R6 II. Those all had dual card slots, and they brought back the joystick, and they brought back the little spinny dial. And so I began to get a little bit intrigued because I was like, okay, that looks like I could probably set it up exactly how mine is. And the only thing I would really have to get used to is the electronic viewfinder. But still, I was stubborn, stood my ground, and I was like, nah, you can do just as good with this. This is great. And you want to know what feature finally made me switch? Autofocus. The autofocus on this works, but once I started learning about how good the new mirrorless cameras were with their autofocus and the fact that they offer eye detect autofocus and this does not, I feel like I really started to notice more how much this camera missed focus. It started to seem like every time I would cull through my wedding photos, if I had a group of like 6 similar images, the absolute best standout one, the best moment, the best expression, that was always the one that was out of focus. And it started to really tick me off. And I started to feel like every time I was culling images, I'm just getting more and more mad of how often this camera is missing focus. And because of that, I couldn't really trust it anymore. So constantly throughout the wedding day, I'd be looking, zooming in, making sure things are in focus. And it was pulling me out of that creative photography mode, which was the whole reason I stayed with this, is I was used to it. So I just could stay in that creative space in my head. But now that I'm constantly worried about focus all the time, it was pulling me right back out. And so finally, at the end of last year, I decided I was going to upgrade to the mirrorless system specifically for the autofocus. And I ended up getting the Canon R6 Mark II. All right, so now why did I get the R6 II over the R5? One, because of price. It's only 2/3 of the price. Two, I did not need 45 megapixels. That is overkill for weddings. I don't care if you disagree. For my business, that is overkill. And three, I did not want to buy CF Express cards or a CF Express reader. Those things are super expensive. And so to even shoot with the R5 on a wedding day, I would have had to buy the camera and then spend another $1,500 on memory cards and a card reader. And so I got the R6 II. And the R6 II has been incredible. The autofocus is insane. The first shoot that I did with it, I hardly missed focus ever. And when I was culling through, I was almost like, well, when I shoot weddings, this is going to be crazy because I'm going to have so much more shots in focus. Because, when a shot's out of focus, you automatically just don't use that one, and it makes your life a little easier sometimes. But anyways, on this camera, it's super cool. I've got this star button set to single point focus. On servo mode, I can just click where that point is, it'll focus, and then it'll lock. And I can like go like this, I can recompose, I can move the camera around, and it'll stay locked on that subject. I don't have to keep that subject where my original point was like I did on here. And I've got the AF on button set to eye detect autofocus. And that works incredibly well. It'll catch right onto the eye. It'll keep it in focus as long as you're holding on to it. It's so cool that I can use both of those different focus modes by simply changing the button that I'm pushing. I don't have to go into the menu and change it manually. So I haven't shot a wedding with this yet. Be sure to let you know how it goes, but I'm feeling very confident with this camera. I'm getting used to the electronic viewfinder, still a little bit weird for me, but I love the autofocus and I love all the buttons that it offers. It's got the joystick, it has this spinny wheel, it's got this spinny wheel, it's got this spinny dial, and so far it's been great. I'm messing around with different custom functions and mapping the button layout how it works best for me. And yeah, so far I'm extremely happy with it, and I don't miss this at all. So yeah, that's why in 2024 I'm finally switching to mirrorless as a professional wedding photographer. Autofocus. All right, see you in the next video.